Hello friends, Lee here from TableTop Bong. Thanks for joining me. In this video, I thought we could hang out, have a fun sesh, and I'm going to answer a community member request, which was to talk about how do you dial in a ball vape, and is it the same between wired and wireless? I thought that was a great question. I love when you guys drop comments letting me know the content that you want to see and the questions you have. I am always happiest to create the content that you're looking for the most, obviously, right? So thank you very much for the request. I'm jumping on it right away. I just saw that in the comments yesterday and it was a fresh comment, I believe. So we're getting at it right away. Makes me really happy to do this. So let's talk about dialing in a ball vape. This is a really, really great request. There are some nuances to this that will help you definitely get where you want to be. So first and foremost, let's talk about ball vape designs, because we have to, of course, address the fact that there is injector, diffuser, wired, and wireless, right? So we have some differences here going on, different styles of ball vapes. Is dialing them in going to be the same all the way across the board? It's going to be pretty close, actually, surprisingly enough. So I'll tell you the nuances and what you're going to have to change up when you're looking at, say, your wireless setups versus your wired setups. It's not that much to it, though, so we can do this pretty easily and get right into it. First and foremost, let's talk about the difference between an injector and a diffuser. We'll just go over this really, really quickly. Why would you want one over the other? If you don't have a ball vape yet and you're still thinking about it, and this is kind of an education for you, then awesome. Let's talk about why you would want one over the other really, really quickly. Here's the way I look at it, and I have a number of ball vapes now in my collection, and I reach for them very, very often. Ball vapes are definitely what I'm using the most. So when am I using an injector versus a diffuser? I am reaching for an injector most of the time during the day, and when I'm looking for specific experiences versus, trying to get as stoned as possible, right? Sometimes I want to use a vaporizer to get high, to elevate myself, right? To take advantage of terpenes and different things that are really going to help me move through a day, help me focus, whatever the case may be. So when I'm looking for those types of experiences, I'm typically looking for lower temperature. I'm really trying to control the experience, and that's where I'm reaching for the injector far more than for the diffuser. I'm reaching for the diffuser, something like, say, the screwball, right? When I'm saying a diffuser, that's this big, wide delivery system versus, it's probably easier to show with the terp hammer, right? You can see the definite difference of your airflow capacity coming through the devices, right? They're just a very different size head to begin with, so they definitely have a bit of a different outcome. When you're hitting with a diffuser, you have a wider area and you're getting a bigger wash of heat. Typically your bowl, you're sitting very close to the heat source, so you're really hitting it hard and you're getting these big clouds, big experience, big stoned effects with the diffusers. Typically most people are running middle of the road temperature to higher with a diffuser, because let's face it, you're looking to get that stoned feeling most of the time with a diffuser anyway. So now when you consider an injector, what I find an injector is better for, like I said, is a more nuanced experience, flavor sipping, when flavor is a big deal to you, and terpene preservation, and you're looking for specific experiences. Definitely an injector is a more controlled ball vape, in my opinion. So that's kind of how I'm reaching for them anyway. I know people will argue that either way, because that's just how it works when you're talking about this. Different people have different experiences, and nobody's right and nobody's wrong. They're just opinions. So in my opinion, when I want to control the experience a little bit more, and I'm not looking for the most stoned possible, that's when I'm reaching for an injector, which is actually more often than when I'm reaching for a diffuser. I'm reaching for a diffuser more often at the end of the night or on the weekends when I want to get blasted. Right, that's kind of how it's breaking down for me. So that's one consideration, or that's kind of how I'm looking at them anyway. So if you're considering it either way, that might help for whatever it's worth. Now, the other things that can really become a variable when you're dialing in your ball vape is the bowl itself. Okay, and specifically the distance between the heat source. When I'm saying heat source, that's the top part of your ball vape up here where your balls are being stored. Oh. Okay, don't store your balls in there. Okay, that's where the ruby beads are being stored, is up in this top section, and this is what's being heated, and that's holding all of the heat, right? And then it passes down through the injector. So the distance between where the heat is stored up here and where the weed is sitting in the bowl down here, this distance is typically going to change where your starting temperature is going to be. The bigger the distance, the higher the temperature. So here's an example. Right now I have the screwball set at 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, and it's going to be very close to the dry herb. I have the terp hammer sit at 600 degrees Fahrenheit, so considerably hotter, and yet the experience, the vapor experience itself, is going to be very, very similar. Okay, so that relationship between the heat source and where the dry herb is being stored in the bowl, that distance is definitely going to matter in where you start your temperature at, right? When I'm unsure, I typically start at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. If there's no rule of thumb that goes with that vaporizer and I can't figure it out from, some literature or something, I just put it to 500 and I try it. And I see what happens. Sometimes it's too hot and sometimes it's not hot enough, and then I just start to adjust from there. And that's what we're going to talk about next, dialing in. So what does that mean? Let's load up a bowl so I can rip one and talk about it. So let's say, for instance, I want a middle of the road experience. I don't want to go too heavy duty, right? I don't want to get really stoned. I just want to have a nice middle of the road vaping experience. That's when I would, something like the terp hammer at 600 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a nice big distance here. So I'm going to end up, actually, you would think it should be really thick vapor, but it's going to be more middle of the road style vapor. This is more what I would call a daytime kind of a buzz for me. So for me personally, that is a really, really smooth, very terpy experience. If that's what I'm looking for, that's probably where I'm going to start, is around 600 degrees with, having a big gap between the heat source and the dry herb, like with the terp hammer. Now, like I said, I have the screwball set much cooler at 425 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just show you, ripping right behind it at a much cooler temperature, because of the different style of head, will give me, basically, I'm going to end up with pretty much the same experience. Super terpy, super flavorful. Much, much less heat, right? But same outcome. So that was really the key thing I wanted you to understand there, right? We have to talk about that relationship. When you want to dial in, think about how you typically like to vape. And basically what most people are going to do is they're going to find 2 or 3 different settings that they like in their experience, and normally just kind of roll with it, right? So I know personally I have a lower temperature setting that I like. I have a middle of the road temperature, and then I have a high temperature that I like. And they're not really based on temperatures, they're based on experience, right? So when I'm talking about low temperature, what I want to do at that point in time is I want to have very, very thin vapor. I want it to be just above visible. Okay, not much more than that. So then I know I'm running somewhere in the neighborhood of about 160 degrees Celsius or 320 roughly Fahrenheit. I like that temperature because that keeps me under myrcene. right? So if I want to have a nice light buzz, I want none of the myrcene effect from the fog and the weed. I basically am going to stay in that 320. So with a ball vape, I basically want to get to the point where I'm just seeing the vapor. And you can sip on that. You can get 5 or 6 really nice draws. And then, you're done the bowl. Now, how do you get there? Well, basically, you have to start turning it down in 10 or 20 degree increments on your PID until you get to the right vapor thickness. And this is what we're going to focus in on. That's how you dial it in, is understanding vapor thickness. If you don't understand what that means, if you take, say, something like the Mighty Plus, and you turn it on to, say, 320 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you put it in the bong and you rip a bowl. Pay attention, watch in your glass exactly what that looks like. Then get your ball vape, load a bowl, and then rip on it and see if your vapor is darker. If it is, turn it down 20 degrees. Let everything equalize. Rip on it, right? Have a few draws and see where you're at. If it's still thicker, then drop it down 20 more degrees. You get the idea, right? Until you mimic using your dry herb vape that you can set your temperature, right? And you know exactly what the outcome is going to be because you're heating the chamber. So when you set this to 320 degrees, you know the chamber and the dry herb is being heated to 320 degrees. So you want to just mimic that by going through and just adjusting your ball vape up and down to get to the same experience that you are, same vapor thickness that you're getting. But what you'll find is when you're doing this with a ball vape, the exact same vapor thickness, the ball vape is still going to be definitely a little more efficient and effective, right? They're just such efficient vaporizers that you're going to just get more out of it than you would with your portable anyway. But we can start to use the portable as a gauge, right? So the other thing you can do, and this was a big one I wanted to talk about today too. If you're you get your ball vape set up and you get your vapor thickness based on reading, running a bowl, testing it like we just talked about, you get it just right, and it's not the exact flavor you want. What do you do then? You can do a couple of things, but the first thing I would do is I would look at changing the bowl, okay, and making small adjustments with the bowl. It can yield a really big outcome. So here's an example that I'll give you. I was goofing around with my Taroma, and I had the bowl out that goes with the terp hammer or the freight train. Okay, so then it sits in here like this. So you have your heat source up here and you have your dry herb down here. So I was noticing this distance and I had a couple of bowls this way. And then I went ahead and I grabbed another bowl, and I'll just show you the difference before I put the head in. Okay, so see the difference where the dry herb sits, right, is right here versus right here. So you can see there's a difference in height here. So that's going to change slightly how close the heat source is to where the dry herb is. Okay, so let me show you. I'm just going to show you with 2 bowls really quickly what that actually translates like. Because when I rip this, so I'm going to drop in about 0.15 of a gram in both of them. Big heaping scoop with that little scoop I have there. And I'm just going to drop this Taroma injector in, and I'm going to just rip it. And what I'm going to do is for both of them, I'm just going to do one long, I'm just going to rip on it real hard, and we'll just try and get as much of a cloud out of it as possible. I have this set at 525 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is going to be a nice middle of the road, reasonably thick vapor. But then I'm going to do it with the other bowl, which is just changes the height slightly, and let's see what happens. Cheers. All right, that is a really nice, middle of the road, very flavorful vapor. Okay, now I'm gonna put the same thing in the other bowl. And I'm gonna go ahead, we're gonna rip this again, and I want you to just notice the vapor thickness in comparison just by changing this very slightly. Cheers. So we adjusted the distance of closeness by, say, 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. And the vapor at the exact same temperature was much thicker, and I will tell you, much harder hitting. So what's the point? What's the key to that? If you're not getting the exact experience you want out of your ball vape, try changing up the bowl. Try making a small adjustment. If your bowl is very far from the heat source, try coming a little bit closer. If your bowl is already very close to the heat source, try gapping it out a little more and then start playing around with your temperatures again, and you'll probably dial it in to the point where you'll be like, oh, this is like having a whole new vaporizer. Changing the bowl, changing your temperatures, it definitely can make all the difference. So you're gonna have to dial it in. You're gonna have to play around a little bit. You might have to pull in, something with a set temperature so that you can mimic the vapor through your bong just to get it dialed in, 10, 20 degree increments up and down, and you're gonna find your exact sweet spot. All right, my friends, I sure hope that helped. I know that was a lot of information in a very short period of time for how much we talked about. But if you're not sure about anything, just drop it in the comments and we'll come back and we'll clear it all up. All right, thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. If you did, please hit that like and subscribe button. Until next time, take care.